while Unity is compiling, there's supposed to be some kind of elevator music supposed to play in the background until we complete.
Yeah, the girl from Ipanema. That one.
And I actually created that plugin for Unity.
That's fine.
Yeah, in Reddit it became the top thread, and like it got like 700, 600 people upvoted it. Just start to that repo, and it is fun as hell. Hey everyone, just wanted to capture a quick intro before the video that you're gonna see, which is an interview. This time I wanted to make something different, and I contacted with a developer which also have his own YouTube channel, and I made an interview with Bilgem Çakır, like a 30-hour long interview, but I decided to split it into parts. So every part will be 30 minutes, half an hour. So I hope you're gonna like it. But before we begin, I'd like to talk about two things. One of them is about Bilgem. So Bilgem is a game developer for a couple of years. Actually, he have been a game developer for a long time, but he worked on big companies such as Microsoft, as the DirectX team, you know, the graphics API team, and in Amazon with the Amazon Go, which is this autonomous market thing, and the Amazon Fire phone, which 3D effects phone, you know, you might remember. So he worked on those projects, and then he wanted to switch to the indie world of the game development, and he started up his own company with a couple of friends, and he have been developing his own engine with his game for a couple of years. So without further ado, let's jump to the interview. Oh, before then, I wanted to mention the second thing, which is in first couple of parts, interview doesn't have the video. Unfortunately, I couldn't recover it. Somehow, video is corrupted, and despite my all attempts, I couldn't recover it. Sorry about that. But in the later parts, you're gonna see the video as well, so you're not gonna miss us. Just wanted to say that. So now we can jump to the interview. Let's go. Would you like to mention about yourself and your indie journey a little bit, as well as with your company?
So I was a one-man company for about a year and slightly over a year. Then the last almost a year now, I have two co-founders, and we kind of reformed into a three-person team, and we're still a very small in the company, but we are working on our first game, which is a kind of sizable, what we are trying to position almost as a AA kind of game. And that's kind of my indie story. On the side, I also do a lot of video production. I have a YouTube channel that I, again, started about 2 years ago. That kind of grew into a decent size. I also am a IGDA Seattle board member, so the International Game Developers Association Seattle branch. We organize a lot of things here at that. I'm also volunteering in Seattle Indies, another nonprofit here in Seattle. So I work a lot. I interact a lot with a lot of indie game developers here, and this is a good time because we are kind of all gearing up for GDC in March. So I'm sure that's on your radar too.
Yeah, definitely.
That's kind of what I do.
Cool. What do you think about the local communities? Like in terms of indie developers has local communities all over the world, but they're just some a little underestimated, I guess. At least in some of the locations. What do you think about that? Is that important for an indie developer, or you know, like, should we just like focus on global?
Well, I happen to think this doesn't just apply to indie games, but in any endeavor, I think self-development and success really derives from two things. One is kind of a good balance of academic and project-driven development for a person. So like you're a person, you want to get good at making games. It's important that you kind of spend some time on kind of learning the fundamentals, academic fundamentals of like programming, whatever, or the art venues as well. And you kind of balance this with a project-driven approach. Like there are projects that you're trying to finish and ship, and you go like you strive towards finishing those things. That's kind of one side of your development, and the second side of the development is the social aspect. Like you benefit so much from finding like-minded people, especially if they're local. That's great. If not, there's internet and everybody's everywhere now, quite literally. But finding a group of people that you regularly communicate with, you regularly discuss, you regularly meet and show off, you regularly socialize. That's, I think, just super critical. And I live in Seattle now, and the Seattle indie scene is a very vibrant community. I've seen a lot of people move here from another town. And when they first come here, they don't know anyone. For a lot of people, finding the Seattle indie community has been kind of their entry to not just their professional development, but their social lives as well. A lot of everyone. And it, like if you look at history, every time there's a big art movement or an important technological movement, whether it's grunge and music in Seattle in the 90s, whether it's I don't know, the computer revolution of the late 80s in the Silicon Valley. It's always a location, somehow pulls people together, and those people kind of start communicating, collaborating, and competing with each other. And then that kind of leads to growth. So I think for indies, it's important to kind of organize and form local chapters, local interest groups, meetups, whatnot, and kind of stay in touch with each other.
Well, in that point, something bugs me actually, because most of the indie, not just indie developers, but because of many programmers are, having trouble to have communication. Like they have, some of them at least have not good communication skills, and having trouble to join two groups and do communication and like things like that. In that point, I also believe local groups can be useful.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's a very good point. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why kind of interest-based meetup groups work so well, because those programmers with the kind of not super matured communication social skills also tend to end up meeting other programmers like themselves in a programmer meetup. So that similarity helps, I think. Like if you throw an introvert into a pool of extroverts, they may struggle. But if you get together a whole bunch of introverts, I think that's easier for them than to connect.
Definitely, I definitely agree on that. That brings another question, which is there's some other part of developers who don't want to actually join this communities, not because of the communication problems that they have, but because of like they don't want to do that, such as why should I join such a such a thing? For example, in recently there was Global Game Jam. Have you participated there?
Yeah, I was part of the organizing team for the Seattle event, and like we had a giant game jam location here with 170 people attending. So I didn't make a game. I didn't jam, but I was one of the organizers.
Cool, cool. Good to know. So you're saying it is good to have participating such meetups or jams and stuff for like in terms of collaborating and at the same time developing communication skills and stuff like that. Um, but like as I said, there are some people that don't want to do that. What do you think about this? Like some of the developers just want to like sit in their desk, closing their door, and they just want to code and no, they don't want anyone to disturb them. So what do you think about this approach? I guess this is one of the questions that I would like to bring.
Sure. I mean, you know, who am I to judge what someone wants to do in terms of like how they want to work on a problem? I kind of understand I mean, I enjoy personally sometimes dedicated times where I'm not disturbed as well. So I kind of relate. I can extrapolate from that point of view how someone can want that all the time. And I understand and respect that, but I guess the one issue there is that if you never do it, if you never go and attend the meetup or the game jam, then you don't really know what you're missing. So my recommendation to anyone would be to try it out, see if you like it. If you try it, then don't like it, then yeah, by all means. I mean, if you think you're more efficient and productive by kind of being socially more isolated, you know, all the power to you. But it's just I'd recommend against making that decision, making that choice, without experiencing the meetups and the game jams and whatnot in the first place.
Exactly, I agree on that. I guess I'm gonna ask. You choose to be an indie developer. That's cool, and we all indie developers here. My question is, you told that like you worked on big companies such as Microsoft, and before that you have a lot of experience even in like game studios, indie studios. Then you said Microsoft, and then Amazon Go, and then you switched to like you wanted to be an indie developer. And I assume that you also have a chance to like go bigger studios such as EA Games, or even places, companies that develops engines, considering that you're developing your own engine to create your own game. So what brings you that path rather than going to continuing to the corporate life in game studios?
It's not a straightforward answer. It's First of all, I really think for an engineer's career, for a developer's career, it's really useful to have a diversity of experiences. So I think you learn different sets of skills and you experience different sets of struggles in different sized companies. The types of things you learn in a like 6-person company is different than what you learn in a 20,000 person company in a 400, 500 people project. Likewise, the entrepreneurship side of things, that's an entirely different ball game either. And that's like things you learn when you are spending your own money that you spent years to save to run a business venture. Taught me a lot. So one of the reasons entrepreneurship, I never invested my own money into a venture that I then went on to execute. So I wanted to do that as an experience at some point. The other thing is, I mean, I had like 11, 12 years of straight corporate life at that point. And I was rightfully or wrongfully tired of some aspects of working with larger teams. That in a large team, you have an idea, and then in order to execute on that idea, you then need to go and convince a bunch of people. You talk to a bunch of managers, maybe you talk to a bunch of other teams that your like proposed change kind of impacts. You align everyone. There's sometimes, if you're unlucky, there are politics issues there within the company, and like after that, which way you go? Like, should we choose option A? Should we choose option B? You write reports, you organize meetings, you do reviews. There's just a whole bunch of things that you do that spend so much time of so many people, and I was noticing that after a certain point in your career, a certain level of experience, it's just more efficient to kind of go and jump that prototype sometimes. In the same amount of time you spend to kind of convince all those people and run all the meetings and reviews and everything. If I just go and prototype something in 3 days, we actually know more by the end of those 3 days than we would
Definitely.
by doing all the reviews and writing the reports.
Yeah.
So that aspect of it, of the corporate life, I get a bit tired of. I go on the exact other extreme and go completely berserk with like decision making and execution. Like now I make a decision, and like the time between me having an idea and that idea being checked in to the code is like 2 orders of magnitude shorter. So that's a huge factor for me. Like I wanted to work alone for a while, first of all, and then once, like the 2 guys that I work with now are really special people that I've worked with a lot for decades before, that I know and deeply trust. So I didn't hesitate to jump on the opportunity to kind of grow the team from, but like be super careful, super wary of adding new players into a team. Like right now, I just really enjoy working with kind of an elite commando, like high experience team of very small size, and like work really fast and work efficient. That's one of the big reasons I wanted to go indie. Also, there's an angle of this from the game and business point of view, business specific point of view, which is with indie games, we are able to do things that we can't always do in a larger company setting. We can experiment more. We can try ideas that a larger company who is spending like a large budget with a large team wouldn't be willing to take those risks sometimes. So I like that. And I think that's what indies, that's the role that indies play in our industry, right? I mean, no corporate team would try Minecraft. No corporate team would try Braid. I mean, there's just so many examples of this that no corporate team would look at the situation. Like they want to ensure a certain level of audience and success when they go and like dump 300 people for 2 years, and rightfully so. I understand and respect that. But then in the end, like 2 guys, 1 guy can come and like try something that nobody tried, open up a venue, a sub industry of sorts almost, and that's an important thing. I want to be part of that. I want to be trying that as well. So those are kind of the reasons why I went the indie route.
In that point, I guess I should ask, you said you have spent some time to be a single team indie for a while. In that time, according to your experiences, what do you suggest for the people who is like a single team, or with your current situation, which is like 2 or 3 person team developers? What do you suggest?
Sure. I think let's start with the solo devs, right? The solo teams, so one-man teams basically have a set of unique struggles. First of all, let's clarify, like a one-man team doesn't have to mean that the person does everything. Like a lot of one-man teams that I know in the world still like hire contractors to kind of outsource parts of the work, especially things like music and sound effects or art. So typically, like I see a lot of one-man programmer indies who will kind of just outsource parts of their non-programming tasks. Likewise, a lot of one-man teams take help from like people like social media experts to kind of run their Kickstarter campaigns and marketing angle, etc. So I still consider those people one-man teams. Like I think that doing that doesn't disqualify you from the term one-man, because I think there's a difference between you being a one-man programmer making a game and then like hiring someone to make music for your game. I think it's different from you and a musician friend making a two-person team and then like making a game together.
Yeah,
Even though the task allocation seems similar, in the first case, you are the clear project manager and you are kind of managing resources like your time or your money. Like those are business decisions that you are making, which I think qualifies you as a one-man team. So that kind of ties into one of my first advice, I guess, is to kind of consider that. Look at your skill set and look what you'd like to do. And if there are aspects of this like game making endeavor that you don't want to do, or that somebody else will do a better job than you for an acceptable cost to you, then outsourcing is something to consider.
Cool.
In terms of the there are struggles for a one-man team in terms of
Money,
motivating yourself and keeping your that's a good point. Again, I think it's resource management. Resources can be time, resources can be energy, resources can be money, and like depending on how much of each of those three types of resources you have, you can make an informed decision about whether you want and the final result out of a particular task, the game music, let's say, is fixed. So do you and I mean fixed in sense in terms of quality levels that you can end up in. So yeah, I mean you look at the quality of game music you want and how you can achieve it between these three resources, whether you do it yourself and you get a certain quality and you spend time as a resource and energy as a resource, or you spend money as a resource and you get it, you get it back. Although, by the way, the outsourcing is never as easy as that. So that's another thing to keep in mind. In a lot, like managing an outsource task is surprisingly high cost to you in terms of work and time and energy as well. So that's something to be wary of. And that's part of the reason why I am usually not outsourcing anything. But it's an option worth calling out. The other side of it is money. I think you get a good point. Money is a different concern altogether. I'm going to touch on that maybe later.
Okay.
But in terms of motivation and kind of staying motivated, being able to wake up every day, day after day, and still be able to engage in your work and like deliver tasks is a challenge for a lot of people. Like a lot of people, when they talk to me, they ask that, like, how do you motivate yourself? Like, don't you get bored? Like, don't you get depressed sometimes, etc.
Definitely.
In terms of motivation, I mean, it's a person-to-person thing, obviously, but I just don't struggle with that. I like what I do. I can do it all day, every day,
Wow.
for years. I just don't suffer from that. But there are a lot of people who suffer. So I think your first question, the social aspect, can help with that too. Like if you're part of a local group of like fellow indie developers, a lot of people here, for instance, do that. Like we have regular weekly meetings that indie developers go, and they just go and develop there. It's not like a meeting with an agenda. There's not a speaker. There's not a PowerPoint presentation. A bunch of 10, 20 indies come meet at a coffee shop, and then they develop there. They spend 4 hours there together. They're still on their laptops working, but they may chat. They may ask a question to someone else. Like the type of things that you would do in a company, like you do get that from the company for free, right? You go to an office, you sit with your friends, and every once in a while somebody may joke about the football game the previous weekend, or somebody can say something, or you may ask a question suddenly and they can answer. Like we kind of lose on that as indie isolated developers if we are always on our own. And mono developers suffer even more from that. So I think one way to cope with that is the social aspect, like being involved in meetups and whatnot. And then the third part is money, as you say, and money is, I think, the way to cope with the money is a huge source of stress. And I'm all self-funded, like our company right now also is self-funded. My one-man venture was also self-funded. So I didn't take any money from an investor, and that has benefits to it too. But the downside is the stress. So like every day that passes by, I'm burning a certain amount of my own money, which I spent so many years and energy to work and earn and save, right? So that's a stressful aspect. I think for another aspect is that I have a family. Like in my age and with my current family situation, I have a wife, I have a son. It's, I think, fair to say that it's more difficult when you're kind of later in life and you have a family to care for, as opposed to say being fresh out of college. You can go back to the basement of your mom, which you should, like, absolutely. So that's kind of my next point. If you have the opportunity to really cut down your expenses as a mono developer indie, I think that's the way to go. Like, that's my biggest advice. If you are able to kind of live in the basement of your mom's house, and if you can share a room with like 7 other guys, you should do that, and you should try to make money as little library as possible. And the way to do that is, rather than like doing side projects and contract-based work, which are valid options that you have to do sometimes, that a lot of indies do. I think like that's one side of it, but instead of trying to earn a bit more, I think trying to spend less is easier in this day and age. And if you have that chance, you should go for that, and that will help with the money stress, I think.
Yeah, I got a couple of friends back then, like 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe they're watching as well. I had friends from local communities that I met. Was like 3 of them decided to rent a house and then like develop indie games. They were mentioning they all eat like pasta every day and night. Only thing
Yeah,
that they eat was like, you know, pasta, and they were saying, "Hey, I became like I ate so many pasta to come here and like, and
that's
yeah.
true. Yeah.
Okay.